Imagine a place where darkness is not just the absence of light, but a living entity, suffocating, feeding off fear and despair. Now close your eyes and picture this. You're no longer on earth. Beside you, an angel, an imposing figure wrapped in light, guides you into this shadowy, ominous valley, the Valley of Darkness. You feel the ground beneath your feet transform into something sticky and viscous, as if the very soil is trying to pull you down. This place is hell. As you walk, the atmosphere around you grows heavy, almost as if the air itself is an unbearable weight. You see condemned souls, separated, distant from one another, screaming without making a sound. They are immersed in overwhelming solitude, endless pain, and the most terrifying part of all, there is no escape. Hell isn't a prison with doors. It's an eternal void where hope doesn't exist. Here, there's no warmth from the sun to heat your skin, no gentle breeze or the scent of flowers. The only thing you feel is the oppressive heat, not from fire, but from pure despair. There's no food, water, or any form of relief. Existence here is torment, an endless cycle of suffering. Suddenly, a demon appears before you, grotesque and deformed, its eyes burning with malice. It shows you something that looks like a machine, a strange invention that produces clothes. It laughs as it says this will be the new trend on Earth, and those who follow it will unknowingly be paving their way straight to this place of condemnation. You try to look away, but the demon continues to display its creations: shorts, thongs, radical hairstyles, each one carrying a sinister message that seems harmless to human eyes but is, in its true nature, an evil trap. And then you realize something even more horrifying. These lost, wandering souls were once people like you, people who made seemingly simple choices, influenced by worldly things, and now they are eternally trapped in this valley, without even a memory of the love of God that once surrounded them. Here, all that's left is emptiness, a total absence of everything that was once good, beautiful, and true. As you walk deeper into the valley, the angel beside you remains silent, but you know it's showing you something. Something you'll need to remember for the rest of your life. You feel a mixture of dread and reverence, because you know this journey is not just a vision but a warning. And in this moment, you understand the weight of every choice we make.
Su dans lit, en explosion chaque aile.
The angel looks at you and smiles slightly. A church is praying, it says. You feel the power of prayer shaking even the foundations of this dark place. And you realize that even in hell, prayers from earth echo with force. And, for a brief moment, there's a flicker of light, but only for an instant. And then, the angel brings you back. You wake up, back in your body, but that vision of the Valley of Darkness will never leave your mind. You've seen what few will ever see, and now you carry the knowledge of what truly happens to those who stray from the path of salvation. So what will you do with this knowledge? This is the journey of someone who visited the Valley of Darkness and returned to tell the tale. Now, it's up to you to decide what kind of life you want to live, before it's too late. But the vision doesn't end there. After returning to Earth, something changes within you. Colors seem different, sounds clearer, as if you've gained a new sensitivity to things that once went unnoticed. You start to notice details you hadn't seen before, especially in the people around you. Small choices in appearance, subtle gestures, now seem to carry a weight that was invisible to your eyes before. And that's when the memory of your conversation with the demon comes flooding back. It had shown you the machine, a grotesque contraption that produced clothes and accessories. But now the true gravity of what you saw begins to unfold. The trends and fashions that seemed harmless on the surface carry something much deeper, much darker. They aren't just expressions of personal taste or identity. Somehow, those pieces, those styles, weren't created by human minds, but by the subtle and insidious touch of hell. You clearly remember the demon's words. It laughed as it explained how these fashions were being introduced on Earth. Short shorts, thongs, radical hairstyles with hidden symbols. All of this was part of a plan. A carefully crafted plan to pull people away from the image of God. Small deviations that, in the end, lead to an invisible abyss. And then you start to see it. The next day, when you step outside, What once seemed trivial now takes on new meaning. The people following these trends, seemingly without malice, walk about unaware that they may be being drawn towards something much deeper and darker. Every tight pair of pants, every extravagant hairstyle, every provocative piece of clothing. It all begins to feel like pieces on a larger board, a spiritual game that few realize they're playing. But what scares you most isn't the trends themselves, but who is behind them. You saw with your own eyes how the demons delight in manipulating Earth's fashions. What seems like a simple choice of style is, in fact, part of a larger scheme, a distraction, a gradual drift away from holiness, a disguised invitation to hell. And the memory of seeing souls in hell because of these choices haunts you. You remember the Christians, men and women, who were condemned for giving in to these fashions. Women with radical hairstyles, men wearing clothes designed to draw attention to themselves, and even those who, in the privacy of their own homes, wore shorts as if they were just another casual piece of clothing. All of it seems so trivial, so innocent, but now you know the truth. You saw with your own eyes what happens when someone falls into these traps. You saw women with their faces disfigured for wearing makeup, their lips cut for using lipstick, their nails ripped off for painting them. You saw men with exposed bodies, those who built their muscles to attract attention, condemned to eternal torment. And it wasn't just the external appearance that mattered. The intentions of the heart, the hidden desires, the secret fantasies were all laid bare before hell. What seemed like a harmless choice of style or gesture was, in truth, a reflection of the person's spiritual condition. You start to understand in a way you never could before. Every choice, every small action has consequences. It's not just about what we wear or how we present ourselves to the world, but about what these choices reflect about our hearts. And in the end, you realize hell is watching. The demon showed you what's coming, and now you know it's not just a matter of appearance. It's a matter of the soul. And as this knowledge weighs on you, reality sets in. Those who don't see it are slowly being led to the valley of darkness. And it's up to you who have seen what you've seen to do something about it. As you carry this burden, another memory from that journey through hell ignites in your mind. The scene is vivid, as if it were happening all over again. You and the angel walking among the lost souls, when suddenly a demon approaches, holding something strange in its hands. It wasn't a weapon or a common tool of torture, but a machine. A machine that, at first glance, seemed harmless, but it carried a sinister purpose. This machine produced clothes. But these weren't just any clothes. The demon laughed as it explained that these pieces weren't simply meant to cover bodies, but to ensnare souls. Every thread, every stitch was infused with evil intentions, designed to lead hearts and minds astray. It proudly displayed its creations: shorts, thongs, tight clothing, all part of a fashion that would soon spread across Earth. You remember how it delighted in showcasing these items. They weren't just products of vanity or human whim. They were weapons, tools carefully crafted to blind people, to distract them from their true essence, to slowly pull them away from God's presence. Each piece of clothing it produced had a malicious purpose, as if each item was a small, invisible chain meant to bind the soul of whoever wore it. And then, it revealed something even more disturbing. The demon called others of its kind, who began parading before you, each displaying different hairstyles. Some had intricate designs shaved into the back of their heads. Others bore occult symbols that seemed to pulse with dark energy. With a tone of sinister satisfaction, it said, "These are the hairstyles being launched on Earth right now." Fashion, according to it, wasn't just an aesthetic choice, but a way to reprogram the human mind, gradually stripping away the image of God from people. As you walked with the angel, you saw things you'd never imagined. Women in hell, punished for shaving their heads, removing the symbol of the covenant they had with God. Brothers who were lost because they adopted extravagant hairstyles, meant to draw attention to themselves. It was terrifying to realize how something as seemingly trivial as the choice of a hairstyle or clothing could have eternal consequences. And then you saw even more. The women who, on Earth, had worn nail polish, had their fingers severed by demons, each paying the price for their choices. Those who had dyed their hair had their scalps ripped off, leaving only exposed skulls. Hell seemed like a factory of punishments, where every detail of vanity was turned into unimaginable torment. You recall how these visions left you deeply unsettled. It wasn't just the physical terror of the punishments, but the spiritual meaning behind them. Every act of vanity, every desire to stand out, to conform to a fashion crafted by evil forces, was like silently signing a contract with hell. And people, without knowing it, were signing these contracts every day. With every step you took in that hell, you understood more about the depth of its influence. Fashion, trends, aesthetic choices that seemed so common in the world of the living were, in fact, a carefully woven net meant to capture souls. The demons didn't need violence or grand acts of evil to condemn someone. All it took was the seduction of a trend, the adoption of a style that seemed harmless. But in the end, it pulled the person away from God's presence. You saw how these fashions weren't just reflections of human taste but projections of the demons' wills. Each new trend launched on earth was a trap, an invisible snare. And now you understand what lies behind it. The knowledge torments you. Those souls you saw in hell never knew what they were doing. They never realized the price they would pay for choosing vanity, for adopting something that, on the surface, seemed like just another fashion. But now, you saw it, and there's no way to unsee it. While the images of hell still burn in your mind, you remember something even more disturbing. It wasn't just the clothes, hairstyles, or makeup that drew these souls to eternal damnation. There was another kind of desire, something much deeper and more dangerous, the hidden intentions of the heart. The angel led you down another path in hell, a place where the torments were different, more silent, but no less terrible. That's where you saw something you could never have imagined. Souls that had been condemned not for visible physical actions, but for thoughts and secret fantasies, buried deep within their minds. Each of these souls seemed to carry the invisible weight of their darkest desires, desires that, in life, they believed were hidden from everyone. You saw, for example, a woman walking alone through the shadows. The angel told you she was a Christian, a single woman who had never been in a physical relationship with anyone. But even so, she had been condemned. She fantasized, in secret, about a man, committing fornication in her mind. And in hell, the price for that hidden sin was terrible. The torment didn't come from outside, but from within, as if her own impure thoughts were devouring her. She was trapped, not by her physical actions, but by the desires she never confessed, the fantasies she allowed to grow in her heart. And then you saw something that made you shudder even more, a couple. Both were Christians, a man and his wife, but even they were there, condemned. They had engaged in erotic practices, creating sexual fantasies that, on the surface, seemed harmless. The man dressed as Superman, and his wife wore a leopard costume, something many might consider just intimate play. But in hell, those fantasies had turned into chains that imprisoned them. Their souls were trapped in an endless cycle of torment. Their fantasies made real but now distorted into grotesque forms, controlled by the demons. What shocked you most was realizing that these sins, these thoughts and fantasies, were never visible to others. On earth, these people seemed normal, perhaps even pious. But deep down, where no one else could see, their hearts were steeped in desires that pulled them away from God. They believed that by keeping these thoughts only in their minds, they were safe from consequences. But hell sees everything, and what you witnessed is that sin doesn't need physical action to consume a soul. All it takes are the intentions, the hidden desires, the fantasies never confessed. The angel then showed you something even darker. There was an industry in hell, a macabre factory where demons produced sexual objects, clothes, and sodomite fantasies. This factory was a living metaphor for what was happening on earth. These tools, these fantasies, were being silently spread among people, leading them to give in to increasingly distorted desires. Every new object, every new trend, was an invisible chain, meant to imprison the soul of those who gave in to these pleasures. The angel explained that these objects and fantasies weren't just toys of pleasure. They were traps, created by demons, to deform the human soul, to corrode its holiness from the inside out. And in hell, the consequences were clear. Those who had indulged in these practices were tormented by the very things that once brought them pleasure. Now, Their bodies were being destroyed in unimaginable ways, their souls torn apart by the same fantasies they had once fed. You remember the scene vividly, as if it were happening right now. The torment of these souls was absolute, a perfect and cruel punishment for every impure thought they had allowed to grow in their minds. And the most terrifying part was the realization that, for them, it had all started so small, so innocent. A thought here, a fantasy there. Until, without realizing it, they had given permission for hell to take hold of their souls. Then the angel turns to you and says something that chills you to the bone. Hell doesn't need great sins to claim a soul. All it takes is an unconfessed desire, a fantasy nurtured in secret. Every small concession, every carnal desire, is like a seed planted in the soil of the soul. And in the end, those seeds grow into roots that extend deep into this place. You feel the weight of these words. What you witnessed wasn't just a punishment, but a warning. The intentions of the heart are seen by God and, more than that, are used by hell to trap those who think they are safe. Every thought, every fantasy indulged in, is a door that can be opened to the darkness. And once again, you return to the real world with this new understanding. The lost souls you saw weren't condemned for their actions, but for their intentions. And now you realize that hell watches every thought, every secret desire, waiting for the right moment to claim what's theirs. What will you do with this knowledge? As the angel guides you further, the weight of the previous visions still haunts your mind. But the next revelation he offers you is no less disturbing, and it seems to touch on a dimension of evil you hadn't imagined before. This time, the angel takes you to a deeper part of hell, a place where the invisible chains that connect the spiritual world to the physical world become painfully clear. You walk through a narrow corridor, whose walls seem to pulse with dark energy, and then, ahead, you see a shapeless figure, a demon. It doesn't look like the others you've seen. This one is in constant metamorphosis, its form shifting like a shadow in the dark. It has no fixed appearance, and its eyes glow with a sinister intelligence. The angel tells you that this demon possesses a unique and terrible ability. It can take on the form of anyone trapped in hell. You watch in silence as it changes, shifting through various figures: men, women, children, the elderly. Each transformation is perfect, exact, as if it were stealing the identity of these condemned souls. A shiver runs down your spine as you realize the true purpose of this demon. It doesn't stay in hell. The angel tells you that this demon is a master of deception. It rises to earth, assuming the forms of souls trapped in hell, and deceives those who are still living. Mediums and spiritualists, people who seek to communicate with their lost loved ones, are actually being deceived by this demon. It's not the person they think they're contacting. It takes on the form of these souls, imitating their voices, their gestures, their memories, all with the intent of fooling the living. And in doing so, it becomes the face behind the false apparitions, the entities that communicate through seances, deceiving those who believe they're in touch with their deceased loved ones. You feel a deep sense of dread as you grasp the magnitude of this revelation. The angel explains that while humans believe they're talking to the spirits of their family members, friends, or lost children, they're actually speaking with a malevolent entity that takes pleasure in deceiving them. This demon takes on their forms, pretending to be souls that will never return from hell, feeding them a false hope of reconciliation that will never be achieved. You watch as the demon continues to change, now taking on the form of a small boy who had clearly died tragically. His appearance is so real, so perfect, that anyone who saw him would believe it was truly the spirit of an innocent child. But the angel shows you the truth. This form is nothing but a mask, a disguise. The demon is not the child. It's a creature of darkness using this image to deceive and manipulate the living, leading them to believe in something that isn't real. You remember the times you've heard of people claiming to have spoken with spirits. You remember the stories about mediums, about seances, about people seeking comfort in the idea that their loved ones are still nearby. But now you know the truth. Those who are deceived by these demons aren't just in danger of believing a lie. They're opening their lives, their souls, to the direct influence of hell. The angel continues, "These demons can take on any form: men, women, children. even animals. They imitate cats, dogs, any creature that can get close to humans and evoke sympathy. They do this to create an emotional connection, to deceive even more deeply. And in doing so, they weave their lies into the minds of those who accept them. You feel the impact of these words like a physical blow. The idea that hell can take on such familiar and deceptive forms is terrifying. But there's something even more disturbing. The demon can even take the appearance of an angel. There are no limits to its ability to manipulate. It can present itself as a benevolent figure, using a false light to deceive those seeking spiritual guidance, leading them down dark and dangerous paths. Then, the angel shows you one final vision before pulling you away from that place. You see people on earth, kneeling, crying during seances, seeking comfort as they speak with those who've already passed. But around them, in the spiritual realm, the demons stir, laughing, assuming the forms of their deceased loved ones and feeding on their despair and sorrow. What seems to be a spiritual connection with the afterlife is, in fact, a carefully crafted trap, a lie that draws people closer to hell. You feel your stomach churn with the understanding of this truth. Hell doesn't need great acts of evil to swallow souls. All it takes are small concessions, small deceptions, lies that seem comforting but ultimately lead people away from God. The angel, with a solemn expression, says to you, "This is the game of hell, deception, illusion. They take on whatever form is necessary to make people believe the lie. And every time someone seeks contact with these false spirits, they draw closer to the abyss, without even realizing it. And so the vision ends, but the images remain vivid in your mind. The deception, the false light, the illusion of spiritual contact. Now you know the truth, and with this knowledge you return to the real world, aware that the forces manipulating the fate of souls are more cunning than you ever imagined. What will you do with this revelation? The vision gives you no rest. Just when you think you've witnessed the worst, the angel guides you to an even darker place. As you walk, there's a subtle change in the air around you. The infernal heat persists, but now something different looms ahead. In the distance, you see what appears to be a vast industry, a macabre factory, with chimneys spewing thick black smoke into hell's dark sky. The angel pauses for a moment, and you feel his penetrating gaze. "Now, I will show you something even deeper," he says gravely. "Here, the forces of hell create tools and objects meant to corrupt the minds and bodies of men and women on earth. As you approach, the metallic sound of machines working endlessly fills the air. A group of demons moves quickly between the gears, like workers on a production line, but what they're producing is unlike anything you've ever seen. These are objects that immediately make your heart sink. Sexual toys, obscene clothing, costumes that mimic degrading practices. Every item that comes off the machines carries a palpable dark energy. The angel explains that this factory isn't just a metaphor. Everything produced here finds its way to the living world. These objects aren't simple human creations but instruments designed to imprison souls, distorting their minds, poisoning their intentions. What starts as curiosity or desire is, in reality, an invisible web trapping those who indulge in these pleasures. You see demons leaving with shipments of depraved fantasies, ready to unleash them on earth. Among them are outfits that encourage perverse sexual practices, objects that distort intimacy and turn it into an act of profanity, sodomite fantasies that invite people to give in to desires that pull them further and further from God. And the most disturbing part is that all of this seems harmless to those above on earth. You realize that these things are already among us. They circulate freely, used as part of a culture that increasingly celebrates limitless pleasure, without realizing that every act, every use, every piece of clothing is rooted in a much deeper, more sinister demonic manipulation. It's as if hell is exporting its depravity to the living world, offering it like a poisoned gift. The angel continues, "These objects are more than simple tools of pleasure. They are instruments created to distort the image of God in human beings. Intimacy, which should be a reflection of divine love, is transformed into something grotesque, distorted, a shadow of what was intended. Every time someone gives in to these impure desires, they are, unknowingly, stepping further away from the light and closer to the darkness. Suddenly, you see something that makes you shudder. Among the objects and fantasies, there are also costumes designed to imitate children's characters, transformed into sexual outfits. This deeply revolts you, as you understand that hell has no limits to its cruelty. It corrupts even what is most innocent and pure, turning it into a tool for destruction. You realize that, for many people, the use of these objects is seen as something private, intimate, with no connection to the spiritual world. But the angel has shown you the truth. These acts, which seem isolated, are in fact directly connected to this infernal factory, this cycle of degradation that only leads to the destruction of the soul. And then, the angel leads you down a side corridor, where you encounter another type of production: weapons. But these weapons aren't made of metal. They are made of envy, lust, and pride. You see a deacon, a church leader, who has been condemned to hell, his soul tortured by a demon holding a car, symbolizing the object of his envy. The deacon had desired to have the same car as another brother in the church, and that seemingly innocent desire had grown until it consumed his heart. In hell, he is now eternally tormented by that unsatisfied desire. You begin to understand that the sins here aren't just large, visible transgressions. Hell is full of people who gave in to desires that seemed harmless: the envy of a car, the longing for something that belonged to another, or even the pleasure of mistreating the weak like animals. The angel shows you one final scene that will mark your soul forever. A man who found pleasure in killing cats, an act that seemed small, insignificant, is now in hell, tormented by creatures that attack him relentlessly. The evil he had inflicted on the defenseless now returns to torment him for eternity. You see the connection between these acts and what you witnessed in the factory. Everything is connected: the desire for power, the thirst for pleasure, envy, and cruelty. All of it is fueled by an invisible industry that works tirelessly to corrupt the human heart. What seems small and trivial on earth has eternal consequences that no one imagines. And the angel, once again, looks into your eyes and says, "These sins, these desires, are the weapons hell uses. It's not the great transgressions that trap most souls, but the small desires, the secret pleasures, the fantasies that grow unchecked. They don't realize they're being imprisoned until it's too late." You return with this new revelation etched in your mind. The factory, the demons, the objects, all of it is real, and all of it is connected to the world in which you live. With each step you take back to reality, you wonder, how many people out there are being manipulated without realizing it? How many are already trapped in this web, believing they're simply living their lives, when in fact they're drifting further from salvation? And now, what will you do with this knowledge? As these revelations unfold before you, the angel isn't finished yet. With a silent gesture, he leads you away from the infernal factory. But the path now feels different. The surrounding darkness seems denser, the air heavier, and a growing unease builds within you, as if something terrible is about to be revealed. The angel guides you to a desolate valley, where the darkness is almost tangible. In the distance, you see a solitary figure, hunched over, surrounded by an aura of guilt and regret. As you approach, the figure becomes clearer. It's a man, but his expression is one of pure despair. His head is bowed, and he seems to be murmuring something, almost as if in an endless prayer, but without hope of being heard. The angel stops beside you and, with a voice heavy with sorrow, says, "This is Caiaphas, the high priest, he who, through his role in the crucifixion of Jesus, brought upon himself a terrible fate." You look at Caiaphas, and the magnitude of his actions hits you like a crushing wave. This man, who had the power to influence Christ's trial, is now imprisoned in this valley, his soul forever marked by the choices he made. But what comes next surprises you even more. The angel tells you that Caiaphas is not just trapped here for what he did during the trial of Jesus, but for something much deeper. After the crucifixion, Caiaphas began hearing rumors that the man he had helped condemn was alive again, that Christ had risen. At first, he dismissed these rumors as the desperate fantasies of his followers. But then, something changed. Caiaphas had a vision. In the vision, he saw the resurrected Jesus, not as the man who had been brutalized and crucified, but as a glorious figure, bathed in divine light. The vision shook him to his core. He, who had feared for his position and the control he held over the people, now saw something undeniable. He had condemned the Son of God. The weight of this revelation fell on him like an eternal sentence, and from that moment he was never the same. In hell, Caiaphas endlessly relives this vision. He sees Christ in all his glory, but knows it's too late to repent. Each time the vision appears, guilt consumes him, and he sinks deeper into his despair. The authority he once held, which had seemed unquestionable, is now a cruel irony, for in the end, he used his power to condemn the very Messiah. The angel continues to explain. He was a man of great authority. As a member of the Sadducees, Caiaphas wielded significant religious and political power, and he used it to ensure his influence remained intact. He feared that the growing popularity of Jesus could spark a rebellion that would bring the wrath of the Romans upon the nation. And it was out of this fear that he took drastic measures, believing he was protecting his position and his people. But in the end, he became the instrument of one of the greatest events in human history. You look at Caiaphas and feel the depth of his regret. This isn't ordinary regret. It's the kind of regret that comes from realizing too late that you've sealed your own fate through your actions. He realizes that in trying to preserve his authority, he destroyed his own soul. Then the angel tells you the most terrible truth of all. After the crucifixion and resurrection, guilt consumed Caiaphas. He tried to continue as high priest, but the vision of the resurrected Christ wouldn't leave him. With each passing day, the weight of his decisions crushed him more. He witnessed the transformation of the disciples, the growth of the church, and he knew he had condemned the Messiah. That burden destroyed him, and eventually he resigned from his position, but by then it was too late. The guilt had already consumed him. Now you understand that Caiaphas, the man who once held Christ's fate in his hands, now lives in perpetual torment. Not just for his actions, but because of the vision that condemned him. He knows beyond a shadow of a doubt that Jesus was who he said he was, the Son of God. And this truth eats away at him, because even though he now knows he was wrong, there is no redemption left for him. The angel turns to you with a serious expression. Caiaphas wasn't the only one who had power and misused it. He is an example of how authority, when used for selfish gain and not for truth, can destroy even the most powerful soul. His guilt is eternal, for he knew the truth but chose to ignore it until it was too late. You watch Caiaphas, imprisoned in this valley of darkness, and the sense of despair is almost contagious. He cannot escape what he saw, what he knows. The vision of the resurrected Christ is his eternal torment. And in the end, you realize, it isn't just the crucifixion that condemns him, but the fact that he had the opportunity to see the truth, and yet still rejected it. With this, the angel leads you back. But the image of Caiaphas, murmuring his unanswered prayers, will never leave your mind. The weight of misused authority, of truth ignored, is a burden too heavy for any soul to bear. And now you understand the cost of turning away from the truth, of using power and position for your own ends. What will you do with this knowledge? As the figure of Caiaphas fades into the shadows, the angel guides you once again, leading you to a new scene that unfolds before your eyes. The landscape around you changes, becoming a stretch of houses, each in various states of ruin and decay. It's a place where the dwellings of souls reflect their spiritual lives, and you begin to understand that each house represents the inner self of someone trapped in condemnation. The angel stops in front of a house that stands out from the others. Its walls are dark and dirty, stained with blood dripping from the doorposts. The windows are wide open, and a pulsating red light illuminates the interior. The angel points to the bloodstains and, in his solemn voice, explains, "This house belonged to someone who was once protected by the blood of Christ. But something happened. Something was opened." You look closer and notice that despite the doors being marked with blood, symbolizing the protection that was once present, the house is now filled with oppressive darkness. The open window allows light from the outside to enter, but it doesn't bring warmth or comfort. Instead, a feeling of unease and danger grows within you. The angel explains that this house belonged to someone who lived a life of faith, a life of holiness, but, through a conscious choice, opened a door to darkness. Even those who live righteously can, in a moment of weakness or desire, open the door of their hearts to the enemy. He says, his voice echoing like a warning. Inside the house, you see a dark shadow moving slowly. It's not a typical demon. This figure is more subtle, almost indistinct. The angel tells you, this is the spirit of temptation, a shadow that enters when the heart of a righteous person opens to sin. It doesn't force its way in. It is invited. The window, which should have remained closed, was opened by the very person who lived here. You feel a sense of anguish as you realize that even those who are marked by the blood of Christ, who were once protected and lived in holiness, can, by their own choices, invite evil into their lives. The angel shows you how, in this house, there was no forced entry. The dark shadow didn't need to break down the doors or windows. It was invited in, subtly, perhaps through a small sin, a hidden desire, an ignored temptation. And now, the house is overtaken by darkness. The angel continues, his expression grave. The human heart is deceitful. Even the most holy can be seduced if they do not remain vigilant. They can be convinced that a small slip, a small concession won't do any harm. But that's how the shadow enters, and once it's in, it becomes much harder to remove. You see that, in one corner of the house, there is a Bible covered in dust, forgotten, neglected. This is a powerful symbol of what happened here. God's word was set aside, and temptation found space to grow. The red light pulsing inside the house now feels more like a warning siren, a sign that evil has taken hold. The angel shows you another house nearby, similarly marked, but with one difference. The door is slightly ajar. Here, he says, the person opened the door, but there's still time. Evil has entered, but it hasn't taken full control yet. The person can still choose to close the door before it's too late. You realize, then, that the greatest danger isn't just in the major transgressions but in the small concessions, the cracks allowed to form. The person who lived in the first house wasn't lost from the beginning. They gradually made room for evil until the shadow took over everything. And what started as a small sin grew until it became uncontrollable. As you process these revelations, the angel looks at you seriously. Hell doesn't force its way into the lives of the righteous. It waits, patiently, for a door or a window to be opened. And when that happens, it moves, silently, until it's too late. You feel the weight of responsibility that this brings. Even those who walk in holiness aren't immune if they allow small concessions to open doors in their lives. And once those doors are opened, they can bring devastating consequences. Before departing, the angel reminds you, even the holiest souls can fall if they aren't vigilant. Every day, with every decision, there's a choice to keep the door closed to evil or leave it slightly ajar, allowing darkness to silently enter. And with those words, he takes you back to the real world. Now, you carry with you the vision of those houses, places that reflect the lives of those who open doors to evil, some still with time to close those entries, others already consumed by darkness. And you know, more than ever, that vigilance over the heart and mind is key to resisting the temptations that lurk, waiting for a crack to slip through. And so, the question remains, will you keep your spiritual doors and windows closed, or will you let the dark shadow in? As the figure of Caiaphas fades into the shadows, the angel continues guiding you, and you still feel the weight of the houses you've seen, the signs of spiritual doors and windows open to evil. But now he takes you to a different place, a house that seems to resist hell itself. As you approach, the sound of constant gunfire fills the air. You hear the echo of machine guns, explosions, and the constant pounding of projectiles against the walls. Yet, the house stands firm, untouched, as if unshakable in the face of the assault. The angel stops in front of the house and, without looking away, says, "This is a house built on the word. See how hell attacks it with everything it has. But it doesn't fall." You observe more closely. The bullets seem to be fired by invisible forces, demons moving in the shadows around it, endlessly shooting at the walls. Cannons echo in the air, and each blast hits the structure with force, but the house remains solid, like an impenetrable fortress. The sound of the attacks is deafening, but what's most striking is the serenity inside the house. There, peace reigns. You realize that despite the war outside, nothing can penetrate those walls. The angel tells you, this house represents a soul grounded in Jesus, a life built on the rock of the Word. Demons may attack, they may use all their weapons, but they cannot bring it down. The strength of this house comes from its foundation, something much deeper than outward appearances. You notice that the house isn't grand or extravagant. In fact, it's simple, but its power lies in something invisible. Its foundation. With each attack it withstands, you understand more about the spiritual strength that sustains this house. It doesn't rely on physical defenses, on walls made by human hands. Its fortitude comes from something divine, something that cannot be destroyed by evil forces. The angel continues, even when hell fires its most powerful weapons, when life's storms come, and the fiercest winds blow, this house will not be destroyed, because its foundation is not made of human doctrines or empty words, but of the eternal truth of God's Word. You realize that the bullets, the projectiles, the explosions represent more than just physical attacks. They symbolize trials, temptations, and lies that hell throws against those who follow Christ. Each shot is an attempt to break faith, to destroy hope, to shake the confidence of the one inside the house. But despite it all, the house remains unshaken. The angel looks at you seriously and says, many will be attacked in this way, but few will understand that the strength doesn't lie in the physical walls, but in the spiritual foundation. The one who builds their life on God's promises, who keeps the Word in their heart, will be able to withstand it, even when all of hell rises against them. You approach the house and see something that fills you with awe. In the center of one of the walls, there's a symbol, a sign, almost invisible, but carrying immense power. It's the mark of the blood of Christ. This symbol is what keeps the house standing, what protects it from all the evil that tries to destroy it. Hell cannot cross this mark, for it is the sign of salvation, the covenant between God and the one who dwells there. The angel leads you to the door of the house, and for the first time allows you to enter. Inside, the peace is almost tangible. There is no fear, no anxiety. The presence of God fills every corner. The contrast between the chaos outside and the serenity inside is overwhelming. You understand, then, that this house isn't just a physical structure. It's a reflection of the soul of those who place their complete trust in God. Even when hell attacks, when life's trials come like violent waves, the peace that comes from a life built on the rock of Christ remains undisturbed. Inside this house, the war outside feels distant, irrelevant. The heart that dwells here is anchored in the promise that God is their fortress, their tower of refuge, their protection against any weapon formed against them. The angel turns to you once again and says, with a firm yet hopeful voice, remember, hell never rests. It will keep trying to destroy what is righteous, what is holy. But a life grounded in God's Word will never be shaken. The attacks will come, but God's promise is eternal. The one who builds their house on the rock will never see it destroyed. You feel the power of these words resonate in your heart. Now, you understand the importance of building your life, your thoughts, and your decisions on God's Word. No matter how many attacks come, no matter how fierce the spiritual battle. If your life is rooted in the truth of Christ, you will be like this house, unshakable, indestructible. With this final vision, the angel leads you back, but the lessons you've learned about spiritual foundations remain etched in your soul. You now know that despite the storms and attacks, there is absolute security in God's Word. And now the choice is yours. Will your life be built on the rock or on the sand?